Let's go. We got Nate Tam. I'm Demetrius and We are going to rock and roll. I'm excited. Nate reached out to me with something that was on his mind he wanted to share. And so I'm always all ears. He didn't have to sell me. I'm just like, you got something on your mind? Let's tack. But first, I want to splice in a quick before we get to what's Nate, why don't you give him a teaser? Give him the quick teaser. What are we talking about?
Oh, okay. The quick teaser is it's a little bit of a rant on what I would consider uh, prescriptive teaching or prescriptive instruction in terms of at least for billiards instruction. I think in general, there's a few different mentalities and methodologies in terms of instruction and teaching and learning, and just gonna go on a little bit of a rant, but.
Good, good. Is it possible that when people hear this, that not only will it be entertaining and maybe therapeutic, but that there might be takeaways with how they coach themselves potentially?
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to tie back the value to them. So stick around. He's going to help you lead yourself better as well. So okay, I am going to splice this in really quick. So let's see if I can edit this. My video editing skills on my Fargo is the suspect, but here he goes. Okay.
Hello. All right. I'm doing something a little different. I've never done this. I guess I'm not very smart. I never thought about doing this, but I thought it'd be fun. This is day 3, the finish of day 3 of a 3-day pool boot camp here in Minneapolis area. For those that don't know, I'm Demetrius Gelatis. I coach pool. You can find me at mnpoolbootcamp.com. MN stands for Minnesota. MinnesotaPoolBootcamp.com. It's mnpoolbootcamp.com. And I don't do traditional lessons. I do 3-day boot camps where they're like kind of total game review overhauls, not fixated on fundamentals, but rather on gameplay. And they're pretty wild, man. They're pretty wild. So I've plugged these a lot in the past. I'm sorry, I'm a little spent right now. I'm kind of gassed. So this is Jason from Denver, Colorado, who made the trip out to work with me. And I just wanted you guys to hear a little bit what these things are like. Jason.
Honestly, I didn't know what to expect when I got here. We arrived and I've never done any form of coaching. And so when we arrived, we just shot around, and literally within probably the first, 10 to 15 minutes, Demetrius kind of already identified my issues, which I had no idea was an issue for me.
Yeah, and so this is where it gets interesting. You say you don't have any, you had no idea that those were issues for you. Mm-hmm. And were these fundamental things, or were these what types of issues? Like, without getting as deep as you want, but okay. What types of things do you think were surprising to you? What were you surprised to learn? How about that?
Well, I was surprised when you told me it was my short. A large or significant portion of my issues was my short game, and I never saw that, and you also identified some key aspects within my stroke that I had no idea. I've never paid that much attention to my stroke and to see how much it's affecting my ball position and my speed, and how often how it's probably contributing to me missing a lot of shots too.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And man, I'm struggling. So we wrapped up our boot camp, so now I'm done. 3 days, guys. Was that intense? Like, talk to me. Now you like to hike up mountains. You live in Denver, and you moved there because they have 14,000-foot mountains everywhere, and you hike up to the summit of these things, and you've done you're not bragging, and you didn't bring this up, but I'm not saying you're some world-renowned hiker, but what's a big hike for you? What's on a 1 day, a 1 day hike, elevation gain, and how high? What's some of the big tough deals you've done?
Probably Mount Elbert, which is the tallest mountain. That was about 5,700 feet of elevation, and it was, I think, about 9 to 10 miles round trip.
Wow! So 5 miles going up, and you picked up over 1,000 feet a mile. I like hiking in the mountains. And that's way outside of my. There's climbs where I've picked up 12 to 1500 feet over 2 miles, and I thought that was pretty. And he's doing that in 1 mile. It's like twice as steep for way longer. So anyway, very hats off. But the point is, you're not a low stamina kind of guy. Was this? This took a lot to get through 3 days. What?
Yeah, I felt like I was at the end of my hiking trip. It's especially mentally, because it was difficult. You know, Demetrius helped identify my issues, and he kept me focused on trying to remediate a lot of my short game issues, and it was taxing. I was getting frustrated with myself. I was getting frustrated with Demetrius. You
hit that well. Thank you.
and it built so much emotion in me that I was becoming so self-conscious of my shot and stuff that it was partially interfering. But however, this is pool. You have to get through that. You have to keep pushing, and you have to keep just working through and trying to find, and if you can't find a way to remediate, try to break it down into specific aspects.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, at some point we have an idea of how hard it should be and what we should be able to do, and sometimes it's not working. And I love the line, curious, not furious. Sometimes you get impatient, like, this shouldn't be so difficult, or I should be able to do this. And you gotta calm down and say, where am I getting snagged? Take a deep breath. It's a little bit tougher than I thought. What part of it's tripping me up? What's the way through it? How is he doing it? It's like those, just constantly having to take a deep breath, let it go, and zoom in. And yeah, it can be tough. And we talked a little bit about it, where towards the end, there's a part of us that wants to just get it over and just go home, get a good night's sleep, come back when you're fresh and you're not under so much pressure. And what I always say to people, I've had a lot of students tell me, like, well, it's hard when I'm thinking this hard, and I'm worried about my stroke, and I'm worried about the box on the table you drew or whatever, and you're watching me, and I'm worried about what you're going to say. And I just look at him, what I like to say to him? I say, well, do you think it's going to get easier in the finals? Because trust me, when you're in the finals, your brain can, at times you can zone out and be like, play the best pool ever, but there's times when you're under pressure and you're going to have the same symptoms occur under adversity of pressures that happen in training. So it's, when things get tough in training, that's a great time to, you don't want to just walk away and take a night off until you feel better, because when you're playing in a pool tournament and you had a really tough match and your confidence is low and your stroke feels shaky and they call your match, you don't get to tell them, I want to go home and get a good night's sleep and wait till I'm feeling better. So it's good stimulation. But anyway, you talked about your short game. I've explained this, but explain to people that don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, for short game, a large part of it is your stroke. I was never cognizant of my stroke, and Demetrius kind of broke it down and showed, like, I'm not fluid in my stroke. I'm not doing the 2-inch guide and then accelerating. I wasn't accelerating through the shot, and that's a big part. And when your brain is not trained that way, it's very difficult to do that. And I wasn't seeing it before, so I had no idea.
Yeah, so when we talk about short game, what we're really talking about is short movements of the cue ball. So there's times when you have to move your cue ball up and down table, and then there's times when you really want to hold it or minimize and have short, accurate movements. I don't know what good grading scale. I don't want to do F through A. Let's do 0 through 100. With 100, nobody's 100, but let's say that Efren Reyes was like, Alex Pagulayan's like a 98, 99 in terms of speed control. And let's say that I'm like I would say, like I say I'm a 95 or a 94. My speed's pretty good. Say I'm a 94. And let's say that like an average league player, like a 450 Fargo rate average league player, let's say their speed control is like a 50. And let's say that there's a beginner who's like a 10-year-old boy smacking balls around his sword fighting with his cue, and he's like a 1 or 2. Where would you, when you came in here, what would you have rated your speed? Like not when you came in here, but like now, looking at who you were when you came here, what would you have rated your speed control on a 0 to 100?
Speed control, that's one aspect that I struggle with, so I'd say about a 40.
That's where you were. Where do you feel your speed control is now?
Probably like 58 to 60, maybe 55.
So you think you've gotten from 40 to 55?
Mm-hmm.
So I would have put you now at about a 65 to 70. And here's why I say that is because you came here and I saw your cue ball control and your speed control. I felt that it was a leap to where at your level, not against me, not against Pagulayan, but just at your level, playing against a group of your peers, I would feel that your speed control would be below average among your peers, and that it would be that if you were to play 5 guys that had the same rating as you, you have some strengths. I think you're very mentally resilient. By the way, I didn't pay him a compliment for 3 days, so this is all like he's like gonna fall out of his chair right now. But like your mental toughness is incredible, and your attitude is very, 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 very strong. You really showed me some resilience, and your personal standards and your commitment to excellence. So those things and your discipline, those things would all against your peers. Those things are very good. I also really. You did not. I didn't want to shark you. Say it during the match, during the 3 days, but you didn't miss many money balls. You made, like, for example, on the run out today that we spent all this time on, you made the 9 every time, except for the one where you ended up straight on the 8 and ended up table. But like, other than the trick shot, like you made every reasonable shot of 9. And now you may say, well, yeah, those are all easy shots. But trust me, most people don't make all. I could tell you horror stories of people missing tons and tons of easy shots. And today I missed ball in hand on that 7, and so like. Most of my students will miss a lot of ball in hands because they don't take them seriously or whatever. Like, you really save. Anyway, so you do a lot of things right. Against your peers, I feel your shot making is good. You came here, your tip accuracy was good. You could draw the ball, you could spin the ball. So I feel, and your shot making was pretty good. And so you fought hard and you're educated about the game. So I think you have a lot of strengths over your peers. And so the speed control was one of the big areas where I think, what is stopping you from beating the guys that are at your level? And it's like, man, that was a big deal. Yep. And so when you came here, if your peers have a 50, I think when you came here you were 40 and they could outpace you, and their short cue ball movements were probably better. And now I feel like if you played those same guys, I feel like they're going to look like bulls in a china shop, and you're going to have a massive edge on them with what you've learned about speed control. And your confidence may not be as high yet, but as your confidence in this builds over the next couple of weeks, I think you're going to be a different pool player for life. And that's just one thing, speed control. So what was the key? What were you doing wrong, and what was the solution?
You're fighting yourself, especially your old habits, and, you recognizing that I need to slow down. I need to have better, ball control. I think just working through it. I mean, it was taxing, but it was so worth it.
Yeah. That's okay. So one thing you said is just recognizing it. Mm-hmm. So most people, if you surround yourself by a bunch of bar bangers that don't run out, then you're not going to necessarily feel like your speed control is that bad, because you're like, well, that's just pool. Sometimes you don't get where you want to go. But then when I play pool, I'm like, no, you get where you want to go. Like, that's not, you don't just not get there,
And you see the table different than most people, and that I value, because I never got to that detail, or you really need to be over in this position because you see this opens this up and this opens this up.
Yeah, it's cool to add some vocabulary and add some ideas about how to look at tables, so that, okay, we're going to come back to that, but the speed control part, most people aren't even aware that their speed control suffers. And the reason I wanted to do this, what prompted us to even have this thing, is I've been working with some guys, and I've been explaining and trying every which way I can to explain that they need to work on their speed control. And I'm talking guys I haven't even seen play, but just like generally, as a podcaster, I can tell you guys, hey, we really need to work on speed control. And the problems with that is that I can say it, but I cannot really convey how important light touch is in this game. I've quoted George Fells has that book, Mastering Pool, and his first sentence in the book is, in life's work, you open up his book and it says, I'm sorry, but I'll just bet you're hitting the balls too hard. And so this is how he begins his legacy book. And people don't understand. So people don't have the right idea of what good speed control is. So they don't even know that they don't know that they're failing. That's the first part. And then the second part is they don't really know how to fix it. Which I think that some of the keys I give to people that want to really work on their light touch is to take slower, shorter swings. You were really long and fast. Like you really wanted to take a long, fast swing. And I think it's really comical to have a really, really, like you're a very successful person in life, and to have somebody that's a big student of the game and played a long time and has aspirations to really learn this game well and are doing a good job of that. And to have it all stymied because we can't move our hands slower. Because just this run that we just did, we spent 2 hours on this run at least. It felt like a day, in a good way. There was a bunch of difficulty: a spin shot, a draw shot, a finesse roll, and then another movement to get good shape and hit a zone to make a pivot on the 8th that was going to involve some speed and some spin and and of all the shots, the one that was the hardest was the soft roll, was being accurate with the soft roll. We had a ball in the jaws, and he had to roll the ball in the jaws. Hanging ball. He had to roll the hanging ball and float 1.5 feet off the rail.
I hated that shot.
And sometimes he was accelerating and dying near the rail and getting flat on the next ball, and sometimes he was bouncing too far off the rail and getting thin on the next ball. Basically, the next ball was on the end rail. He didn't want to roll the hanger in and get straight, but he didn't want to come flying off the end rail and getting thin. And your ability to manage speed was really... we've been working on it for a couple of days, but the reason I do 3-day boot camps, it took 3 days.
Yeah.
It took 3 days, because it's one thing to say you need to work on your speed. It's one thing to tell you how to do it, but the application of it, and then the confidence in it, and the real understanding of not just how to do it, but how important it is. I think over time, it was like this spiral. It was like a chain where first you understood that it's important. And then you understood a little bit better how to work on it. And then a little bit later, you understood even more how important it is. And then a little bit later, you found the importance of speed control grew in your mind over 3 days, and necessity is the mother of invention. And as speed became more and more important and more pivotal and more rats, where 3 inches of a roll shot was going to make or break your run out, it wasn't power draws. I have said that the ability to soft roll a ball is much more important than the ability to power draw length of the table. I think I've seen that over the last 3 days. And so little by little, as every single rack, it seems like it hinges on a couple inches, on a couple rolls, and it's like, wow. And so as you see the priority get higher and higher, and as we keep seeing these situations come up where we have to have the control, little by little, you keep asking for more from yourself and digging deeper and really slowing down and really zoning in and really zooming in on it to where 2 inches of your cue is like your whole universe. And so it was like, part of it was identifying where your speed control was and what was possible. Part of it was really seeing how big of a deal it was over 3 days and having the experience of failing because it wasn't good enough, so that you were sufficiently motivated to zoom in and give it the respect it deserved and really develop the techniques. So in the end, I can tell everybody listening, speed control is much more important than you think, and you're not where you need to be, and it's holding your game back. The reason you don't know about this is because telling people to practice soft rolls does not go viral on YouTube. Nobody's going to sell videos. Nobody's going to go viral on TikTok talking about rolling balls softly. And so people watch videos on bank systems and draw shots. But in the end, and I can tell people this is really, really important, but in the end, people don't realize how much better they can get at soft touch, and they don't realize how important it really is. And so I had a quote the other day. I was searching for this. I had a quote the other day where I said to some guys, I said, if there's stuff that is holding you back, if there's stuff you need to do to get better at pool, every video that you click on and watch is a distraction from you doing what you need to do to get where you want to go. And so as a coach, one of the things I hate is I think we live in a culture where people are just passive information consumers, where they sit on their butt and they watch videos and they think they're getting smarter. But meanwhile, the more that videos that they're watching, it's like, no, there's probably 4, 5, 6 levers we could pull to make you better. And if you're not working on those things, watching these other videos isn't even helping your game. It's actually distracting you from what the work needs to be done. And so there are some things, and it's not sexy and it's not exciting, because good pool is boring. Good pool is not, I'm not Venom, what's his name, Florian. Like, I'm not here to do trick shots, right? So I'm not going to be working with people on double mass A's. It's like, these are boring things. But the boring things are where you win and lose, and that's where the rubber meets the road. But if people are driven by algorithms of what gets a lot of views and what's going to give them a dopamine rush and what makes them feel like they're learning more info, I just feel like people are clicking around and watch. And it's not black and white. Videos are good, but in the end, I'm just trying to find a way to communicate how important soft touch is, and some of the keys, which is you can swing your cue slower than you want, or slower than you think, shorter than you think. It's less than you think. And it frustrates me that people's pool games are going to be crippled because they can't do less. And so what I would encourage, just as one drill, put balls on every pocket. Put them 2 balls, I'll give you a 2-ball gap. 2 balls, so there's 2 balls away from the corner or 2 balls away from the side. And practice putting the cue ball and just rolling up and touching the balls where they don't fall. Find out without decelerating, just find out what cue speed, how long of a stroke, and how fast of a stroke does it take to roll up and touch balls. And Anthony Baglino, one of the best players in the country, he made a real deep run in the one pocket at Derby this year. And I was playing a match against one of his friends from Florida, and he was kind of watching, and then he was practicing in the next table. I saw him spend over an hour rolling up and touching balls. And here he is, one of the best players in the country, 780 Fargo, playing deep in a one-pocket tournament. And what's he practicing? He was practicing rolling up on balls. It was hypnotizing. I should have been watching my match. Maybe that's why I play so bad. Anyway, okay. So this whole point of this was me pleading with you guys to take small things seriously and less exhilarating videos and more boring basics and get really zoned on. Okay, so thank you for letting me rant on that. So then, what would you say to somebody? There's a lot of people that don't get instruction because they think I already know what I need to work on, and the day when I already kind of know how to play. Because when I'm playing good, I play good. I run tables and everything's good. But I just not very consistent, and so not as consistent I like to be. So I know how to play. I just need to get my stroke a little bit more consistent so I can counter my game. So I'm working on some stroke drills and some shot making drills. I kind of know what I need to work on. I've watched the videos. I can I don't need instruction or what would I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, if you're not consistent, then I would actually say that there's something going on with your fundamentals, and that's the aspect that you really have to have someone evaluate you. I mean, it's difficult to see your issues outside of yourself because, I mean, you're constantly playing the same people, and to get that consistency, you need someone to provide you the direction, the instruction.
Yeah, so I think it does help to get an outside perspective. I personally, I'm glad you said that because this shows this isn't scripted and you get to have your own opinion. I'm not confident that it's your fundamentals that lead to a lack of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's, when we did this run, I was very consistent. It wasn't because of my fundamentals. It's because I kept leaving myself really easy shots. So in my experience, when people aren't consistent, if you need perfect fundamentals to run through a rack of balls, then my opinion is that you're probably doing something wrong with your patterns at cue ball. Because my patterns at cue ball are good enough that I don't need to be perfect to run through the balls. And I ran through these balls again and again and never needed a perfect swing. So I think that most people that aren't consistent think it's their fundamentals. But my opinion is, if what you're doing is leaving yourself recovery shots, and then there's 75% recovery shot, 75% recovery shot, and then they're failing to make them all the time, sure, the reason that they're missing 1 and 4 is because of their stroke. But you have 2 options. You can either spend your lifetime trying to figure out how to stroke straight enough to go from 75 to 95% on these real hard shots, or you can learn to leave yourself 95% shots. And I'm of the belief that most people that are frustrated with their consistency, they leave themselves too many hard shots. When they're having good days, they bomb through them all. And then they're like, why can't I just bomb through them all every day? And the answer is because nobody can bomb through them all every day. You got to, at some point, learn how to play cue ball, patterns of position, and speed.
Yep.
So I think people think it's fundamentals, but I think that that's a link in the chain. But I think people overrate fundamentals. I don't think people appreciate cue ball, speed, and patterns enough. Anyway, they're all important. What do you think? Does that make sense, or what are your thoughts? If you have anything to add, you can share. I'm not.
No, I agree. Yeah. And everyone has, issues within their game. And it was extremely helpful because what was a weak is now a strength for me, I feel, going forward.
Yeah. What else besides speed control? What are some other things that you might take away? I'm curious, just in the moment, what stands out? I mean, we've done a lot.
Just knowledge, because you talked about any energy transfer to the cue ball, and just through the short stroke, I never thought of being efficient in transferring the energy.
Yeah. So you're talking about timing of the swing and how much of your swing is going into the cue ball, and starting to become aware of your timing. Yep. You kind of have to so what happened is he was a decelerator. He was using big swings and then decelerating down to speed, which not only is very inconsistent to control for speed, but it's also, from a confidence standpoint, doesn't feel good to have to decelerate. It doesn't lead to confident striking. So as we started getting his timing, so he was going through the ball, all of a sudden it's like he had to relearn speed control because he was getting so much more action out of his cue that he didn't know. It was like he didn't know his own strength all of a sudden. So then it's like, it's funny. It's funny how much faster you go when you're not pressing the brake pedal the whole way. And so he had to relearn his speed control. But then the good part about all that is everything gets better. Your soft rolls get better, but then your power game gets better too. Because when you start getting really good timing and you're getting through the ball and getting good reactions, you don't have to use speed. You can use timing to get the power, which lends itself to better striking accuracy, better tip accuracy. As you get better tip accuracy, you can use more spin, more low ball, whatever, more draw, more spin, so that you don't need so much power because you're using cue ball striking to tip and timing. You're using tip and timing to move the ball around instead of power. Your pocket's opening up bigger, and you're swinging slower and more accurately. So you're swinging a more accurate delivery cue at a bigger target, and getting better speed and direction of the cue ball as a result. That's what I saw. Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty cool. You learned we did a lot on cue ball, a little bit on patterns. If you had to say like how much, if you had to pie chart it out, how much time do we spend on fundamentals? How much time do we spend on cue ball? How much time do we spend on patterns? How much time do we spend on pocketing?
All right. So fundamentals, maybe 5-10%, if that.
And I never told you to stand different. I never changed. Okay, I want to make one thing clear. I never changed how he swung, where his elbow was. I never changed where he stood. I never changed his grip. I never changed his eye sighting. Nothing. I never changed anything fundamentally. The only things we did was the way he swung it, the timing of his swing, and then a little bit on eliminating some body movement, right? There was some jumping, a little bit of jumping.
Yep. Let's see. Cue ball control 60-65%.
Yeah, so we spent 60-65%. I would agree with that. And then the rest was patterns, probably another 10-15% on patterns, and then maybe some miscellaneous speed control, and then some miscellaneous stuff that comes up. So we spent a lot of our 3-day working on cue ball. Why couldn't you just watch a few videos? What was the benefit of working with me versus just watching some YouTube videos?
I would have never picked it up from videos. It's hard to see that issue, and plus it's not, you actually don't notice it, or it's not even, there's no instructions. You only notice it on professional players. If you pay, and I never paid attention to their strokes. It never dawned on me on looking at how they strike the ball, how they accelerate.
Well, now we're talking about fundamentals again. We're talking about cue ball.
Okay.
Go back to cue ball. So why can't you just, watch the pros play and watch a few instructional videos and learn the cue ball?
It's not always that obvious, and you have to have someone teach you that knowledge, but with spin, with follow, and those fundamentals. They're not fundamentals, but
yeah, those parts. I know it's been a long 3 days. He thought he was done, and I turned on the camera, but he's ready. You're ready for like the plane ride home in the bed. I know where he's at. So bear with him, because you'll be here too one day. You'll know all about day 3.
Yes.
So what I would say, because I'm fading too. So what I would say, I feel like it's like 4 a.m. We're like trying to keep going. People are only going to notice. So people have a certain level of understanding. And when they watch stuff, they are only going to absorb what they've already built an understanding of. So, for example, maybe I've said this before on the podcast, I'm sorry, but if I spoke a couple sentences in English, the dog jumped over the moon. I think it's the cow jumped over the moon. That's where I'm at, guys. Dogs are jumping over moons. You might remember that sentence. But if I spoke a sentence in Greek and then told you to repeat it, you wouldn't remember it. Why? Because those were sounds that didn't make any sense to you. And so they were just noise and you didn't capture them. And so if I said a bunch of words in English and a bunch of words in Greek and then told you to see what you could remember or what you wouldn't have even, it was like, oh yeah, just some background noise. I heard these words in English and some background noise. The Eskimos have 100 words for snow because they whatever, that's cliche anyway. Maybe they don't. What if they don't? What if that's just a saying? And they're just like, no, it's just snow. What are you talking about? Anyway. Okay, regrouping. I'm trying. There are a lot of details. There's a lot of details. And each detail is good for a couple inches here, a little bit better direction there, a little bit better understanding here. And most people do not know those details. They know big things. They know big things. They understand tangent line. They understand the spin's going to go that way. But they don't understand like details of how spin. There's so many nuances to this game that people are just oblivious to. And so if I was going to give an example, I'll give you an example. Thick hits on object balls magnify the side spin. So you can use the same amount of side spin and cut an object ball thinly, and the cue ball will spin the way it started. But if you use the same amount of side spin, but shoot a ball thick, the spin, as the cue ball, it loses its speed to the object ball, and the measles go from being diagonal to like being sideways. Because what happens is speed is a spin to speed ratio. How much spin is on the cue ball versus how much speed going forward. Forward roll makes the measles go vertical. Sideways roll goes sideways. So when it's rolling with spin, it's diagonal. And when you, it's like if you shoot a stop shot with spin, it spins sideways because there's no forward roll. So when you follow a ball with a thick hit shot, the measles go from diagonal, and as soon as you hit that object ball, boom! It's like it supercharges the spin, and then the spin reacts differently. And so the same shot might be different depending on the thickness of hit on the object ball. Other things that people don't pay attention to is when you spin like a high inside two railer. Sometimes you hit it where it spins off the first rail, but by the time the cue ball is getting to the second rail, it's rolling naturally and it bounces across table. Other times it's spinning where it catches the second rail and it opens up the angle because it's still spinning as it hits the second rail. This is not necessarily the most important thing, okay? These things aren't necessarily what you come here to learn. My point is, there are so many details of this game that people are oblivious to. And that's true with pattern play. It's true with cue ball. And it's so you can learn a lot. And I know guys, Nate Tam's a regular on this pod, and he's an example of how if you really are diligent and studious about what videos you watch and taking them to the table and breaking them down, and you follow the right people and you apply yourself and then play a lot, like you can self-educate. These days more than ever. But there's a lot of things that I just think that a lot of things go over people's head, and it's not secret information. It's more boring details of information that they already think they know. That's what I think. I don't know. Does that sound reasonable
No, I agree.
Okay. Because I just want to help people roll balls into pockets better. Okay. Anyway, this has been half an hour. Did you have fun? Was this fun?
Yeah. I mean, it was challenging, but once you get through it, it's you relax and you can reflect on and enjoy what I went through in this.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy it, and it's hard for me. Like these are incredibly strenuous. So you better, I mean, if you don't love pool, you know what I mean? If you think, there's no secret, there's no magic bullet, it's hard work, but it's fun. But I lost my train of thought. Bottom line, I had fun. Jason. It was a lot of fun. And so I think you picked up a few things about pool. I would bet on you now against you of 3 days ago. That's the most, like, there's two things at the end of the day. There's two things that matter. You're never going to be happy with your game. I'm never going to be happy with my game. So in the end, it's only a question of, do you think your bottom line and performance improved? And
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's that, and that's the other one thing. And then the other thing was, when you look back over the years and think of the time we spent together, when you think of it, will you smile?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
As long as it's fun and you grow, that's at the end of the day. That's what I care about. So I'm glad it was a lot of fun.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for coming.
And I'm back. All right, maybe I'm back. I don't know if that worked. I'm back. So thank you for your attention. Now to Nate Tam. What is on your mind? Talk to me. Go ahead, rant.
Oh, okay. I've had a few conversations as of late with some friends who are either taking lessons or they're just really, sticklers on certain things. And there's nothing against, this is not a fundamentals conversation. It is tied to fundamentals. But man, I've had this conversation at least 3 or 4 times on 3 or 4 separate occasions with 3 or 4 separate players, all asking about
That's
these
like
things.
that's like 27 to 64
Yeah,
times.
maybe I said that wrong.
I was just trying to keep up with you. Okay.
But this is all recently, maybe within the last month or two.
Okay.
Like constantly coming back to this conversation about doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, if the pool gods came down and visited us, if we asked them what is doing it the right way, what would their response be? What does that mean? Do it the right way? Because, and I have nothing against PBIA instructors. Nothing against them.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to be as, I'm trying to,
Should we do the thing where we look around, make sure there's no PBIA instructors in the room? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, check your closet for Dr. Dave.
I'm intrigued.
And this is just something that I've seen, whether it's online or elsewhere. But there's a lot, especially at the beginner to intermediate levels. There is a lot of prescriptive instruction, right? So,
define that for me? Give me an example.
Yeah, when I say prescriptive, and this is something I might go back to every once in a while, there's a big difference between being prescriptive versus being descriptive, right? Prescriptive being you have to do it a certain way, your mechanics have to look this way, your pre-shot routine has to look this way. Prescriptive,
so like a specific instruction, like prescriptive would be like, we need you to keep your elbow higher, or we need you to change your bridge. Like you're giving you a specific instruction that you need to do in your game. Whereas descriptive would be like, just, we want to be able to accomplish this, or, there are some things you should know about how your body works. Things just like is it like the difference between you need to change this versus like an observation or a target that we need to achieve? Tell me a little bit more. I
don't know if it's necessarily a difference in how you observe those things. It's more about the instructional difference of having, whether it's a coach, instructor, other player, yourself, like looking at, imagine you're taking, videos of yourself shooting the Mighty X drill and you say, oh, my elbow dropped there and that's why I missed that shot. Like, well, do you know that for sure? Really? So for me, it's a little bit of a rant on prescriptive instruction, and can it go too far? Is it more about the principles involved in what you're prescribing and why is that important? Or is it about the actual, mechanics that you're trying to get these other players to adhere to?
So if you suppose, let's use that example. Somebody's doing the Mighty X drill. They drop their elbow. They missed the shot. the prescriptive instructor might say, oh, elbow drop, that's not what we want. My prescription is to keep your elbow high and not let your body move. So what would be the descriptive instructor's approach to that situation? Just so we have a counterexample.
Right. So maybe the breakdown will be, oh, you didn't stop the ball. Let's say they even make the ball, but the ball rolls forward. You could say, oh, you dropped your elbow and that's why your tip rose and that's why you didn't stop the ball because you didn't strike the ball low enough. Right? That makes total sense, right? So on one end, you have the prescriptive instructor saying, don't drop your elbow. It'll make it so you're not hitting too high on the cue ball. Or you could just say, you struck the cue ball too low. Let's find a way for you to naturally hit where you're aiming to hit the cue ball.
So in a weird way, it's the difference between talking about the processes you're using with your body to try to achieve the outcomes versus just looking at the results and saying, these aren't the results we're trying to get. What, how can we maybe try to get them? It's kind of
let me. All right. So
is it like top down versus bottom up?
Yeah. Like you have kids, right? Or you?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. When they were learning to walk.
By the way, hang on. My dad joke of the week. We were at my daughter's final choir concert, and the teacher got up and said, "This will be our last concert for the 24-25 school year." And I looked at my youngest and I said, it's not 24-25. She's off by 400 years. Anyway, okay, maybe you had to be there. In the moment, it was great. I got a good groan out of her. So anyway, yes, I have kids.
So 3 or 4 players later, 3 or 4 conversations, 3 or 4 whatever it was earlier.
Yeah.
You love your number jokes. Okay, so you have kids, right? When your kids were learning to walk, when they're 9, 10 months old, are you moving their foot into place and saying, now put that foot there? No, move your hand like this. Now keep your body straight. Why are you falling over? Like, come on, they're infants, right? Or do they just see that they need to learn to walk and they start doing it themselves and over time they figure it out? Now, so, I'm not saying prescriptive instruction is bad. I'm saying sometimes it can go too far and even be detrimental to a player's ability to adapt to what feels natural for them.
Tim Galloway actually used that as an example. He said, thank God we all learned how to walk before we learned how to talk, because otherwise there'd be a lot of people that never really learned. And he's in his Inner Game of Tennis book, he's got a lot of examples of things like this where verbal instruction breaks down. So anyway, I'm not going to hijack your rant all the time. I just wanted to make sure people knew what you were talking about. But yeah, keep preaching.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's really that simple. I think it's a shame to have so many good players who maybe they do things a certain way, but as soon as they give instruction to someone else to do it the same exact way, for some reason it doesn't work for them, and then they just say, "No, baby, drill." You gotta do it this way. You gotta make sure that your form looks a certain way, and then you'll eventually get there. But I'm not sure spoon feeding them mechanics will always benefit the player in need, because everyone's different, right? You can't take Alex Pagulayan and Alex Kazakis with a 2-foot height difference and tell them to stroke the ball in the same way. Like, there's no way they can both do things the same way. I'm sorry.
So this is for sure. I think that a few reasons why instructors, now I'm kind of answering the question, why do instructors teach this way? One thing is it's a lot easier to use words than it is to use, it's the least creative and challenging way to communicate information. It's like, I'll just kind of data dump it. So we can just talk and talk and talk. There's another thing where certain people look at the pool game like it's an object that we're wrenching out, or like a computer code where we're just going to type it in and make it the way we want. And they're just like, do this, kind of like manual instruction. We'll just kind of get it that way. And then there's another thing, I think, which a lot of instruction, I know when I first started taking money for lessons, like it was a really weird thing. Like the first time anybody ever just paid me money for lessons, there's this immediate like, what if they walk away and they say I didn't teach them anything? And if that student can walk out the door and regurgitate a list of 1,000 things that you instructed them to do, whether or not you sabotage their game, they've got like this list where he told me a lot of stuff. And so then they feel, and more importantly, if you're a self-conscious instructor, you can feel like, oh, I told them a lot of stuff. So you can feel like you spun your legs, and therefore you feel like you did something. So I think there's insecurities and lack of competency of alternate approaches to teaching that might lead to that. But I know it doesn't work. So like, just to talk about, let's give some examples of how it doesn't work. I'll go to the Tim Galloway thing, where one of my favorite stories was where he was playing with nonverbal instruction, realizing the limitations of verbal instruction. And he had this new student that had never hit a tennis ball before. And he wanted to learn, did a lesson before they even tried playing. So he said, I'm going to skip my usual preamble. And instead of giving you any instruction, I'm just going to hit 10 forehands. I just want you to watch. Don't say anything. Just watch and just soak it in. So Tim hits 10 forehands. And then he hands the racket to the student and says, give it a shot. And the student ends up making a comment. He says, hey, I noticed the first thing you did on every shot was move your feet or move your foot. And Tim says, okay, just whatever, just hit the ball. So the guy throws the ball in the air, hits a perfect forehand. Everything was like good timing, good follow through. And then Tim noticed the only thing the guy didn't do was move his foot. The one thing that he had consciously pointed out was the one thing he failed to do. And that was when he started getting really mystified about the value or the lack of value of verbal instruction. So anyway, and then he went on to tell some stories I've related on this podcast before about how basically the other one I'll just kind of rehash real quick was learning the foxtrot dance in gym class, and how he was told, like the gym instructors were like, first step forward, 3 steps forward, then stop, then turn right. It was like step-by-step stack rank instruction. And he said it was like 3 or 4 weeks of an hour a day in gym class before he could do that dance without counting in his head. But then he talked about like people going to a party where there's people doing like dances at a club, where people come home and learn 2 or 3 dances that are far more complicated than the foxtrot. And they did it just by watching and then kind of imitating and then maybe making a little adjustment because that doesn't look right, or, and then like they just figure it out. And without any conscious instruction. And then he pointed out that the irony is that if somebody had asked those people how to do those 3 dances, or if they knew how to teach those 3 dances, they'd be like, I don't know, man, I don't really know how to do it. You just kind of do this. But if somebody wanted to teach the foxtrot, he's like, you could have wrote a book on the foxtrot, but not been very good at doing it. So you get really good at knowing how to do it in theory. But anyway, so those are some of the pitfalls of over instructing and try to back at it up. What are your thoughts on that, or where do you want to go from there?
I wouldn't call it over instructing. I would just say you're instructing with the expectation that there's some sort of adherence to a form that will absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, benefit XYZ player. When yes, the benefit may be here, but the benefit could be so much more if maybe there were some other approaches tacked on, and so I'm again, because for a long time I was such a fundamental nut, right? I like, you've seen me play, you know what I look like when I get down on the ball. It looks pretty, I think it looks pretty textbook.
You're clean.
Ways,
it's
right?
Very clean. Yeah.
So it's not like I'm saying throw all of that out the window. All I'm saying is when it specifically comes to instruction and when it comes to learning and adapting on your own, I literally did this last week. I like to roll the video camera when I practice so I can look back at it and see what I'm really doing. And I noticed that, oh man, this looks kind of ugly the way that I'm stroking here. My elbow is a little bit further out from my body than it normally is because I'm changing a couple things on how I'm placing the cue, and that just makes my body look really awkward and yucky. Meanwhile, I'm hitting the best balls I ever have in my life. But in the background, I watched the video back a few days later. I'm like, ugh, that looked really ugly. So next time I go out to the pool hall or wherever to hit some balls, I'm consciously trying to change stuff to make it look better, but I didn't need it to look better, and suddenly I was missing everything. It was like I got so much in my head about what it was supposed to be that I forgot, what it was supposed to feel like.
So there's a couple of big assumptions that get made, because I just posted something last night you might check out, and I noticed the same. I was watching myself play. For example, I noticed on certain shots on my follow through, my tip would go through the cue ball, and then like either my elbow would drop a little bit post contact, or my follow through, like my cue would go straight, and then like an inch to the left, like straight, and then like it would just kind of swerve like an inch to the left after the follow through or on the follow through. Now you could say, well, it was happening post contact, so it doesn't really matter. But maybe on a bad day, that's not right, or maybe I'm doing so like it doesn't look perfect. And so there's two schools. There's a fork in the road of how we can handle this, right? The first thing we could do is we can make the statement and say, our stroke should be piston straight all the time. It should never veer anyway. If that can happen, that's probably throwing off your game. You probably don't even know it. It's only, if it, it's not, even if it's not throwing you off on a good day, it's going to throw you off on a bad day. It's going to make you inconsistent. Maybe when your timing's off, it's going to lead to really bad problems with striking and tip accuracy. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the cameras rolling, and we're going to figure out why that happens. And then I'm going to figure out what my body needs to do so it doesn't happen. And I'm going to make myself do it until it never happens again. And then I will be a better player. And that is like the natural kind of reaction to that. And the thing is that there's a lot of assumptions baked in there. So like one assumption is that this is hurting our play. Another assumption is that we can improve it. And that another assumption is that if we change that it's going to make us better. I guess that it would make us better is also tied to the first assumption that it's hurting our play. I guess that's the same thing. Yeah. So we're assuming that we can figure it out. We're assuming we can fix it, and we're assuming that's going to benefit us. And those, I'm not saying that any of those are wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they are untested assumptions. And if you really want to like work on pool, you can't be that bullheaded, that stubborn, that like, you can't make these conclusions without evidence. And so it could be like, I think those, so I'd rather phrase them as a question. Like, is this hurting my play? Is this something I can improve? Will this will this improve my game? And because I could also say there are worlds in which you could say, are there any potential downsides to zooming in the film and messing around with my stroke? Could that create lack of confidence in my fundamentals when I need to play? Could I try making changes in my game that backfire and actually cause me to play worse, and then I can't figure out how to do it right again? Could it be something that when certain shots come up, I'm like, oh, now is my elbow in the right spot on this shot, or do I need it that like? So what people don't realize is the better you get at pool, the harder it is to make changes that improve your game. And people assume that anything that they do is going to make them better. But as you get better and better, it's actually a lot easier to make it worse than it is to make it better. And so you have to start being a little bit more tactful and not so like, oh, that's not how I want it. I'm going to just rehaul everything until it's perfect. That you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So anyway, it's the difference between asking those things as detached questions and making like a bedside manner, soft touch exploration versus like, I don't like the looks of that. I'm going to change it all until it's perfect, and then I'll benefit from it. What do you think?
I think that it's really easy for pool players to lose objectivity when it comes to looking at themselves in the mirror as they play. Something I had this conversation a few times too, where people are like, you have such good follow through. How do you get that? I'm like, I don't think it matters, dude. Like, look at Shane Van Boney's follow through is 2 inches long versus, Federer's got a foot long follow through sometimes. Like, what, you think it matters? Like, you think what happens after contact with the cue ball, like what happens to your tip after it makes contact with the cue ball is going to like change where the cue ball goes? Like you're using the force or something? Like, it doesn't work that way. Now, I do think what happens to your tip after contact can give you hints as to how you're hitting the ball, but I don't think what happens. It's not causation, right?
Yeah. And so again, you can look at that and say questions and say, okay, follow through. If somebody wasn't following through, far enough, and their timing would suspect, what would be some shots that would test that, or what would be some things that they might see in their game as far as like, would they be rolling forward on long stop shots because their timing wasn't pure? Would they be, like what are some things that we could do? Because in the end, what you're saying is as long as they're getting through the ball well enough to get the timing out of their cue that they should, and they're able to achieve the things on the table, why are we going to make this like a wild goose hunt to wild goose chase to do we actually hunt the goose or do we just chase it? Anyway, they why do we need to? Well, I mean, there's no violence implied in wild goose chase. I mean, there's nothing in that statement that implies, well, I was the one that made it dark. Okay. I was the one that went to like taking the animal's life. Maybe we were chasing it to feed it. We're caretakers. Anyway,
Hey.
I just noticed that. It's like a little Rorschach test about where I'm at with the geese. So totally lost my train of thought. But basically, we're talking about we're not even talking about, so we're talking about two things. We're talking about on this granular level how people instruct themselves and jump to conclusions about needing to make changes, number one. And then so number one, they jump to conclusions about needing to make changes because arbitrarily they decide it's not the way it should be according to their mind or some expert. And then the way that they try to make those changes is verbal instruction that's like, do this, got to make sure I do this. And it's not necessarily the most effective way to implement instructions that we may not even need. So then what you're saying is an alternative is just to be a little bit less overbearing with how we diagnose and treat our game. Is that kind of what you're really getting at?
I don't know if we should pay less attention to how we diagnose and treat our game. I think it's the opposite. I think it's working smarter, not harder, if that makes sense, right? I think you can optimize how you train by maybe tweaking certain elements that really focus your training on adapting and learning skills and skills principles instead of specific, granular, again, prescribed form. So, do you know what ecological dynamics is?
No, you were going to tell me about this though.
Okay. So ecological dynamics is it's becoming more and more popular in martial arts, specifically jujitsu and judo and stuff like that. But it's a framework that combines something called ecological psychology, sort of like adapting to your surroundings and being in. It's like like nature versus nurture, I guess. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but ecological psychology meets dynamical systems theory, which is it's like understanding how things move in relation to each other. It's like a mathematical thing. But anyway, it's called ecological dynamics. And this is it's like a training methodology that has sort of evolved in a lot of martial arts, where instead of teaching prescribed movements to get out of a certain lock or move in a certain way or get you to adapt in a certain position, right, to overcome your opponent. The idea is you are taking elements, principles that you're trying to learn, and you're creating a training methodology using games or using constraints in some way, or just being creative to intuitively learn these skills instead of teaching them step by step by step, right? And your brain kind of just absorbs it through the environment of learning it in this way. Like, okay, for instance, I've heard you talk about this before. If you have a player who just can't find the edge of the cue ball, right? Just cannot for the life of them hit more on the side of the cue ball and still make good contact and not miss cue, what do you do?
Boy,
What's one way of getting them to be more comfortable or force them to hit towards the edge of the cue ball?
Okay, I think I know where you're going because I have a lot of things that I do to tinker, but I experiment with what works. But one of the things that definitely has worked is putting a blocker ball in front of the cue ball so that they can only hit the part of the cue ball I want them to hit. Right.
There you go. Right. And do you think that works really efficiently, really well?
I've had people that were just like, oh, I never in a million years would have ever hit the ball there, and that now I know where to hit it. Yep. Yeah.
Right. So instead of prescriptively telling you, no, this is where you have to put your cue. This is where you have to put your cue. This is where you have to just say, no, I'm going to give you an environment where the only way for you to successfully strike the ball where you want is to get around this object ball. Right. So that would be a form of ecological dynamics as a methodology in pool training. So I think we do this kind of thing all the time. And that's why, some drills or some exercises and some forms of teaching, I think, are more efficient than others. But again, this is all my opinion. This is all
No,
an
no, yeah,
opinion
yeah.
piece. And that would just be, an example of one. So again, ecological dynamics is I have a little page here like with all of my ecological dynamics stats. It's essentially it's a focusing on learning through interaction with the environment rather than isolated skill building through something like drills. Again, not that
Yes.
drills can't be part of ecological dynamics.
Yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah. That
encourages
does. Yeah. Sorry.
it encourages adaptability, perception, action, integration, and problem solving. So even things like patterns, right? If you want to work on patterns, having a really prescriptive cue ball location to go from like the 1 to the 2, and then putting the ball from the 2 to the 3, like just work on the 1 to 2 transition and work on like groupings of where you want your cue ball to be instead of always taking the same shots. You could take similar shots and learn through adapting to whatever shot, adapting to wherever you want the cue ball to be played next based off of where the shot's starting from. There's a lot of ways to go about doing drills and stuff that I think could benefit you more than just drilling a single shot over and over and expecting the cue ball to move in a certain way, all because your tip placement is perfect. Like, I think, I don't know, maybe we're getting a little too granular there, but yeah,
Okay, so
generally speaking.
yeah, yeah. So let me just kind of slow down and we have all the time we need to sort through this. I'm just trying to catch up and
Hmm.
follow where my brain went. So one thing that I think, okay, first of all, just trying to understand what ecological dynamics. Basically, what we're trying to do is instead of having some theoretical, perfect step by step way of doing things to achieve a certain outcome, what we're trying to do is create an environment that will kind of naturally steer us into the outcome that we need, and then we kind of our body and brain just kind of figure out how to reverse engineer how to become the animal that can do what we need it to do. And so
Yep.
this is instead of starting from the bottom up, I'm going to create instead of saying here's the outcome I want. Here's how I'm going to build myself into that outcome step by step through verbal instruction, and then trying to work it from the bottom up. We're just going to start with here's the outcome we want. Let's start swinging for that. And how can I set up situations that guide me to that? And I think there's a couple thoughts I have about this. One of the reasons, because I already hear people screaming, but how am I going to do that without any instruction? And if I don't try to tell myself how to do that. So there's a couple things about this. And the first thing that comes to mind is, where I stand on this. One of the reasons people instruct themselves this way is because it's a very ego heavy, ego involved approach, which is I know what I want. I know what steps I need to do to get it. And now I am going to tell myself how to do it until I get the result I want. And then I'm going to have achieved the goal because I'm so smart and so disciplined. And it's very controlling with our learning process. And some people like that because it makes them feel like they're in charge. Whereas one thing that people hate in the learning process, naturally, their ego hates, is they hate not being in control. They hate not knowing how long it's going to take. They hate not being, sure how it's going to happen. Like they want to have answers. How am I going to do this? How's it going to work? When do I get what I want? Like the ego really wants to be in control. And so just being like, hey, we're just going to let it develop and we'll see how it goes. People don't like that. They like the white knuckle, the steering wheel with their growth. So that's one objection that a lot of people have. Does that make sense?
I think the opposite is true as well, where you have a lot of beginner and intermediate pool players who look up to certain players or certain guys who have told them over and over, or they've read or they've seen videos or whatever. They say, "Hey, this is how you do it." And even if it's not an ego thing, it's this guy does it this way, so I want to imitate and be like that, not knowing that it's not helping them.
Yeah. That makes sense. And the other thing that was kind of on my mind was like, when you're saying the prescriptive stuff and things have to be a certain way, there's a couple problems with it. Not only don't things always have to be a certain way, and I've been given, and I'm sure you have too, I've been given prescriptive advice from better players that was flat out wrong. And it's not rare in the pool world. Either it was just inaccurate, or it wasn't. It was either wrong and flat out it was ineffective and inaccurate, or it was wrong in that it was optional and not everybody has to play that way. So okay, so I was saying that, and the other thing is that there's really people. I'm making generalizations, but I know I started this way, and I think it's pretty natural to be perfectionist and a little bit. What's the word I'm trying to say? Like people don't like. Okay, it's like in the machining world, right? You have tolerances, right? It's got to be within plus or minus 5 thousandths of an inch or something like that. You don't sit there and stare at the thing because it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. And I think that's a really hard concept for people. I think people really like the idea of perfect. But the problem is, let's just take an example. Say there's a guy, he's 62 years old. Listen to this right now. And he played pool when he was a kid. He played a little bit in high school. He played a lot in college for a few years, maybe out the bars, had a few good years, got running some tables, and, was a decent, player out of his area, but never really got serious about the game. And then all of a sudden, life took over. He got busy. Maybe he played a few games of pool here and there, but there was basically like 30 years of his life where he barely picked up a pool cue. And then started playing again a few years ago. He had more time. And just now he's, retiring, or his kids are moved out. And he's got a little bit more time. And now he really wants to give it a go. Okay. I'm not here to limit what that person can achieve. And I definitely think that the game has changed in 40 years. We've got new information, and maybe he's a little rusty, and it might make sense to get a little instruction. It might make sense to take a look at your fundamentals and figure out what's out of whack and maybe smooth some things out. But in terms of what this guy is going to be trying to achieve with the remaining, years of his pool career, he's not going to try to beat filler. Like, winning matchroom events is probably not the order. And so here's my point, not only do machinists have different tolerances, or not only do they have a tolerance that's not perfect, but those tolerances change depending on what they needed to do. And so if I need to build a like something that I can't even think of the word, that a turbine, or some kind of something that's going to like spin at million RPMs in some NASA engine or something, like maybe the tolerances need to be really, really fine tuned. But if what we're doing is screwing in my door, I'm just looking over there. Like, if I have to screw in a new doorknob because I want to get one that locks for my students, so whatever. So if I screw in a new doorknob, what is the tolerance on that screw? It's not 5 thousandths of an inch. Like, as long as it hold, like, I don't need it to be, machine edge perfect. And so the thing about it is, if that person was obsessed with making their stroke not just 5 thousandths of an inch perfect, but like perfect, they are spending way too much time on this one part for the job that they're trying to for the machine that they're actually trying to build. And so when I've seen people have this perfectionistic ideology, it's like, to me, the reason I'm so not anti-fundamentals, but the reason why that raises red flags with me is because I've seen people go down that road where it's like, hey man, you're right now you're running out 1 out of 20 8-ball racks off the break. Realistically, you're trying to get this to like 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 to 1 out of 5. Like, if you could get it to 1 out of 10, you'd be happy. And if it ever got to 1 out of 5, you'd be like a career accomplishment. So on a bar table, to get from a 5% to a 10% to a 20% run out percentage is hour after hour after hour of Mighty X drill and video footage. Is that really necessary? And is that really going to work? And the problem is that if we had infinite time and we never got older and we never had anything else to do in life, and if every change we made us better and didn't make us worse and didn't affect our confidence and there was no psychology to the game, then maybe if you have an infinite budget, you can go ahead and continue to toy with it until it's perfect, or closer to perfect. Maybe in 50 million suns, from now, you'll have that perfect stroke. But I think in the real world, there's concessions you have to make, and you just have to say, sometimes it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Is this the biggest lever I can pull to improve my game? And I think I'm almost done with my rant, because I feel the same way. And I feel this way, is that instead of you dictating to your pool game, here's how I'm going to make you better. I think it pays to be a little humble and say, what are my pool matches telling me? Where am I leaking? And what are some of the big levers I can pull to shore these things up? And and then you have to follow the results a little bit more, and you don't get to dictate, no, here's what I'm going to do, and it's going to just, you have to, yeah. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect is the enemy of good. I think that's the phrase.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then does that, okay, so does what you shared with me about kind of irritation with over prescriptive instruction, did you get that? Was that rant? Did you hit everything you wanted to hit on your rant about that?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was sort of one side of the coin was what's what's annoying that I hear a lot from, other amateurs and instructors, etc., versus how can we address it better?
Yes.
And I
So
don't
now, yeah.
necessarily, yeah, I don't necessarily think that ecological dynamics is the way of the future. I just saying like this is the opposite side of that coin where you don't have to look for prescriptive instruction as the end all be all for what's going to make you a better player. Maybe it will make you a better player, but maybe you'll learn 5 times faster if you put a piece of tape on the end of your tip like Niels Fine did in that video he did, right? Have you seen that?
Yes. Yes.
That's an awesome video, I think. Like as a way of learning the constraints of what a stun shot can do, you know?
Yeah. So for
So
people that haven't seen the video, Niels put a piece of scotch tape over the top of his cue, and then if he didn't hit very, basically, it just makes it eliminates the friction between, instead of having a chalked leather tip, you have a glazed, piece of tape, and if you hit it all off center, you just missed you. And so, it's just a way that you can train to where if you're worried about, learning where the center of the cue ball is, you can either sit there and like tell yourself, look at videotape and lay the cue ball, or you can just create a device where with a piece of tape, you'll figure out where center is, give it a half an hour. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, and it also helps your patterns too, and I know you do this similar drill to brainwash where you spread the balls out on the table, nothing too close to each other, but then you have to soft roll everything in without touching a rail or without touching another ball. And just running 2 or 3 balls is hard enough.
Yeah, it's
Let
funny because
alone trying to figure out the pattern to run out the rack is tough.
you don't know this, but the 30 minutes I sliced in there with my student from last week, we worked a lot on speed control, and then I think it's going to be very valuable because we're working on speed control a lot too in our group. So anyway, um, but yeah. So the idea is you throw all the balls out, take ball in hand. You have to try to run as many balls as you can. You can't hit another ball. You can't hit a rail, and you can't do any backspin or side spin. All you can do is soft roll balls in, and it's surprisingly difficult. Like it's easy to run 1 or 2 balls and get stuck. It's surprisingly easy to run 1 or 2 balls in that drill. And it's not really meant to be a drill that you run all 15 balls. It's not impossible. I technically have stumbled through a rack like that, but like basically, if you could be running 5 to 10 often, and sometimes touching double digits, then you know that you've got a good soft touch. And what's interesting about that too is I've had people do the no rail drill where they can use stuns and draws, and inevitably they start trying to draw their ball around and they lose their cue ball. And I point out how often the shot that they lose their rack, if you the shot that their run is over, the shot before they try to draw their cue ball somewhere. And I'm like, see how that works? So anyway, the funny part is I've had people do better once I take away stops and draws, just because it forces them to use the right damn tool for the job. And once I limit their toolbox, they get better results. Then I let them do stops again and they do better. But anyway, I digress. I just thought
Well,
that interesting.
no, so again, this is a constraint-led coaching methodology that is in line with ecological dynamics. This is literally the same kind of stuff. You're not trying to say, here's how you work on your soft rolls. Make sure that your bridge is only this long and make sure that you're using these 2 fingers to hold the cue, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You can figure that out on your own. However it helps you accomplish that drill the way that you're looking at it. And I think that's just a more intuitive, baby taking their first steps kind of approach. Again, I don't think it always has to be that way. I just think it's insane to me how prescriptive some of what I've heard other players go through with their coaches. It blows my mind.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, so what I think about it, what we're talking about is there's a place for prescriptive training. There's a place for ecological dynamics. And you're probably going to have a combination depending on what works. In the end, you got to figure out what's needed at the time. But when I was talking about the ego playing a role as far as why people like instructing themselves, the other thing that people like about it is it allows you. So there's two different things. There's how you perform, and then there's your personal standards. And a lot of people cannot win with how they perform. So they console themselves with winning by having the highest personal standards. And they say to themselves, sure, Jeff can beat me now, but Jeff, yeah, I mean, he's played a lot of time. He's got that gaffy stroke and he doesn't really work on his game and he's not trying to be machine perfect. So he might beat me today, but my standards are higher than his. And so in the long run, someday he'll see and he'll rue the day. And so people can play this game where they tisk other people because other people, maybe they're ahead of me now, but I will show them something because my standards are higher. And so people sometimes kind of feed on having impossibly high standards. And so even if those standards aren't serving them in terms of their growth and their enjoyment of the game, they don't necessarily want to let that go. And so let that go. Nobody cares how high your standards are. In fact, I would say if you're so perfectionist that you think having perfect standards is awesome, then the question is, what if those perfect standards are sabotaging your growth and performance? Are they really perfect? So anybody that's patting themselves on the back while missing balls because they think that they're on some path to pool utopia, I want to challenge you on that one and say, no. So what happens, in my opinion, is there's an easy way to keep score, which is the table. The table's the truth, like reality keeps score. And so when you start living in these little delusion fantasies about how high your standards are and what's going to happen down the road and how, what someday everybody will see or whatever, it's like, you know what? We don't need to live in make-believe about who's got this bright future. Why don't we just look at what's going on here now in reality and try to make that better?
What a delusional pool player. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there, man. The reason I know you should have seen me when I was 15. man, I can't believe I'm the same person.
Yeah, delusional and ego-driven pool players is pretty much all we have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in recovery. I'm in permanent recovery, like every day in every way. I'm trying not to go down that path, but yeah. So that's cool, man.
So that's it. That's my little rant. It's just I can't take it sometimes where I'm just like, why you gotta tell everyone this stuff that just doesn't always work with everyone. Everyone's different. I don't know. It just kills me.
I think that the prescriptive stuff, I think that when people are like, well, isn't some of this necessary? I just say try to be minimalist about it. Like be minimalist. Yeah. The same way when I was talking about draw in my pool game. Like, yeah, there's times I draw my ball, but I use it minimally, like when necessary. Like prescriptive instruction, verbal coaching, you're going to need it. I'm not saying it doesn't play a role, but number one, use it minimally. And then number two, use it with a soft touch. Use it like a little bit more detached, a little bit more soft touch, like questions instead of assumptions. Like, will this work? How could this be better? I think that I have reason to think that if I make these changes in my game, I do think it would benefit me. Not sure, but I hypothesize that if I see this problem with, my tip coming up and not getting draw, my tip accuracy on draw is poor. I see my elbow dropping. I do think that might help me. So I have real world evidence that this might be a problem and that this might, be interfering with what I want. So then, maybe I will. How would I test that? Maybe I'll experiment with just trying to keep my elbow high during delivery and not worrying too much about the outcomes and just seeing how that feels and how it goes. That could be an experiment you run, but it's like a light touch experiment, not like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to fix that, then we'll get the draw shot work. And when you start getting like really emotional and commanding and control, it's like the difference between messing with machine pieces again. It's like the difference between kind of turning them around and seeing if you can wiggle them into place versus like trying to force some brute force together. It's if they don't slide together, that is not meant to be. And then
Yeah,
to your point about prescriptive, about ecological dynamics, I've had a lot of people with draw shots where instead of worrying about the elbow drop, I just lay my break cue across the table with the tip underneath the rail on one side and the butt on the rail on the other side, forming a ramp. I find the spot where I put the cue ball in front of the cue, and they have to cue under the cue, and then their elbow stops moving real quick that way. so even that could be done in multiple ways. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend where he was having, he got a lot out of a lesson that he took from a high-end pro, but same conversation. It was just like, what I say, it's like he's drinking out of a fire hose, sometimes you just need a glass of water.
Yeah. Well, I'm guilty of that as an instructor. I know that I know that it's not like everybody when I do these 3-day boot camps, they don't go home and know everything that I said and remember it all and retain it all. But that's
Yeah, of course.
not my goal. I try to kind of create some buckets where it's like there's going to be some things that we really work on that I expect you to understand and be able to do, and that there are going to be some big changes, permanent changes in your game based on things that we are going to work. So there's going to be like a small category of things that we work on to proficiency. Then there's going to be another small category of things that we kind of seed and make improvements on, or at least, open your mind to certain concepts and kind of tickle them a little bit so that, yeah, at least they're on your radar, and that maybe as you play, you'll make discoveries more quickly, or you'll be open to certain things. So I'm going to kind of slot a few things so that, maybe in the future, those things grow a little bit more rapidly. And then there's going to be a lot of miscellaneous stuff that, maybe if you hear it again, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that now, but I don't really expect everything to stick. So in the end, I try to make sure that we get certain things done that I want to get done. But anybody I've had a lot of people, again, it goes to controlling their growth. A lot of people are very concerned about like, what if I don't remember everything that we trained on? And I'm like, yeah, you won't. That's like that. Again, there's a perfectionistic idea. Like if you're coming into a 3-day boot camp with the idea that you're going to try to remember everything we said, like that's not how this works. And so it's like, that's the wrong expectation. If we're having anxiety, like what if I don't know if I can work all this into my game? It's like, no. People are very fearful. It's like, no. It's going to be okay. We're going to do things that they can't not improve. And then it's a path that just goes like I'm giving you good directions. And anyway, yeah. So I get the idea. It is overwhelming, but it's only overwhelming to do a 3-day boot camp if you're holding yourself to a standard of perfectly remembering and applying everything exactly right every time. It's the same thing when people try new things, and once in a while, like, oh, I was kind of like thinking about these new strategies or these new techniques, and I lost this game because I was trying to figure out if I should do it the way I used to or this new way, and kind of sharked me. It's like, yeah, there's going to be times when you do that, and there's going to be times you try something we trained on and it doesn't work. But for every time that happens, there's going to be 5 games you ran out that you wouldn't have because if you didn't know how to do it. So it's perfect is never the standard. Yep. It's always about improvement. Yeah. So that's cool. I'll check it out. I like it. And I will challenge myself on my next boot camp to ecological dynamic my way as often as I can.
I mean, you don't have to use those words. It's just, it's just trying to be
so I don't forget. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just trying to be open to being, more adaptive, creative, and more about being able to, because I think constraints and playing games like that, like when I'm training, playing games with myself, that to me is first of all, it's more exciting, and it helps me sort of push myself to the edge of my limits. Same as the slow rolling brainwash drill. That pushes you to your limits. There's a reason why it's good for you. It's because you're like right at the edge the whole time. So I think that's what this kind of training does all the time. And maybe not that you can't be pushed to your limits with more prescriptive instruction. I just think it's easier to naturally find where your limits are and push yourself when you're not thinking about everything that's in your body. It's just more about the focus on the task. So anyway.
Yeah. There's always those 2 ways to work on stuff, from the bottom up and from the top down. And what we're just saying is that oftentimes you just want to look at what are we trying to do, and then try to put yourself in a spot where either you, like with the tape or with the cue or the blocker ball, like either you could do things to actually just kind of force you to do it the way you want, or you could find ways like certain drills, like the speed, the roll drill, or just certain drills where, or like, like, or pocket tighteners. Like if you want to improve your striking, sometimes you just put pocket tighteners or a blocker ball so that you just have to shoot shots that require, instead of saying to yourself, I need to figure out how to eliminate body movement, you just set up a shot where, holy smokes, if you move, it's not going to go, and then just shoot it for a while, Yeah. So it's just,
go ahead. Yeah.
It's just fun to experiment and be experimental and playful, not bullheaded and controlling.
Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying drilling shots is never a good idea. I was drilling shots last night, and practicing. I just I give the cue ball or the object ball a little wiggle room to be different, and then that allows me to sort of see the shot differently, play it a little differently, but it's by and large 95% the same stroke, the same shot. I'm I'm changing a little bit here and there to feel out the ability, because you're never going to run into that shot ever again in a game scenario. You have to be adaptable. So I don't know, just the idea of drilling shots on a donut other than the Mighty X drill just kills me sometimes. But
Interesting. Yeah. I get it. I think that anything, when it comes to like the pie chart of your training, if anything starts becoming obsessively like the only thing you do, I don't think that's normal. I think that there's times to tinker with everything. And so if there's a certain shot that for whatever reason, you just keep seeing it wrong, I think stickering them up on donuts and just shooting it 30, 40, 50 times, I'm okay doing that once in a while. But if that's your daily practice, is I'm going to sticker up one shot at a time until I know how to make them all perfectly every time, I think that that's not very diversified. So it's like, I think you have to be very, very diverse with your practice and very playful and experimental. And there's a reason why people get, before practicing, man, has gotten to be an epidemic. So there's a local pool room, and everywhere you go in this particular pool room, everybody's doing drills and nobody's like playing each other. And it's like they're all doing these Mighty X drills and straight in drills and L drills and line drills. And it's cool because, like, yeah, these are real students. But if they're not really playing each other, then are they actually learning and getting better? What are they getting better at? Like, how are you? It's just weird. It's really weird that it's like kind of disproportionate practice. And it's like, again, we've talked about this before, but like, even when you think about how much practice versus how much competition, it's like, boy, if I could wave a wand, I'd say, man, if somebody was practicing 20 to 25% of the time and competing 70, 75 or 75, 80% of the time, like, to me, I'd be happy. Like, I think it's good to spend 10, 20, 25% maybe of your time training. And then out of that pie chart of training time, of course, there's some time for the donut stickies, and then there's times for all just being experimental and trying different things in different ways. But I think I think it's easy for people to end up spending way too much time practicing and then way too much time stickering.
Well, again, I think loss of objectivity is really easy. So even if you train even if you spend most of your time training, hardcore training, head down mode, deliberate training, there's no guarantee that once you see that same scenario in game that you'll be able to rely on your training, because you haven't seen it before in that scenario. So
yeah.
I think there is a balance of trying to be adaptable, not adaptable, but being sensitive to knowing when this shot or this circumstance or this type of stroke or this whatever has shown up in a match scenario. And I think those are things that you can train for. Again, refer to ecological dynamics on that, but there are ways to simulate that kind of thing, but you never really know unless you have the objectivity to see it while you're playing. And
yeah, I think competition, I think about it like when you're at the gym, when you're doing like free weights versus a machine, and you just have to use those stabilizer muscles, and it's a little bit tougher to manage because, it's reality. And when I think about competition versus practice, it's like, you can practice, but in a game of pool, there's a lot of skills that are physical. There's a lot of skills that are mental. And if you play 5 hours of 9 ball, you're going to get the amount of time you spend shooting off the rail, shooting long shots, shooting spin shots, shooting draw shots, shooting combinations, shooting banks. The amount of all those that you practice is going to be perfectly aligned with what is likely to come up in 9 ball. Whereas when you practice, so like you might end up in a race, let's just say you play for 5 hours, you play 3 races to 7 or 3 races to 9, whatever. And let's just say in the course of that day, you shot 7 bank shots, 5 combinations, 7 jump shots. And then, whatever, however many breaks, 20 break shots, like whatever it is. Well, that's probably the average amount of those things that are going to come up. You shot over ball shots, maybe, 5 over a ball shots. And, maybe you shot elevated off a rail where you just speared down the ball 7 times. So it's like, okay, so you worked on everything exactly the right amount for how it's likely to come up in a competition. Whereas when you practice on your own, you're like, oh, I'm going to work on banks. So the reason that's cool about practice is that you can take a skill that rarely comes up in competition and say, man, I don't really shoot over balls all that often in competition because I try really hard not to get over balls. So when those come up, I'm not always comfortable with them because they only come up a couple times a day for me. So let's spend, 10 minutes or 15 minutes once in a while shooting over ball shots just so I know what my, how to handle those situations and kind of just give myself like a year's worth of over a ball shots in 20 minutes. That sounds cool, maybe. But a lot of times, if you try to manually figure out how much time to spend on what, there's going to be skills that you're neglecting, and that actually just playing in matches. Another advantage of practice is that when you're a good player and you're running a lot of 9 ball racks, a lot of the shots you're shooting are very routine and may not necessarily. If 90% of the shots you're shooting are easy, you could make the argument that maybe this is not the most effective use of your training time. But on the other hand, that builds confidence, that builds rhythm. There's a lot of things about, flow and keeping the routines. Anyway, I think that practice can be useful. So it's funny because now there's 2 levels. When you practice, I think that there could be use for stickering up certain shots once in a while. And I think that there could be a use of verbal instructions and prescriptive, training there that has a role, but it has to be like a minimal and a small part of that training pie chart. And then training itself has a role in your pool growth, but it should be a small part of your growth along with a lot of sparring and play, because there's a lot of stuff that comes up in sparring and play that you'll just never train for physically and mentally. And ultimately, if what you want, this goes back to even training and drilling and just practicing by yourself. Even the idea of practice by itself is kind of a descriptive training idea compared to just playing, because what you're saying is my prescription is to train and that's going to make you better. It's like, really? And if the measurement is Fargo rate, if the measurement is how do I do in match play against other people, then that is the ultimate test. The proof's in the pudding, and you don't want to take your eye off the ball with the assumption that if I practice, my competition will automatically get better. That's a good theory, but you always got to go back to how are you competing and how are you doing? And so because that's what matters, and that's how you measure success, don't take your eye off that ball. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a balance to be had for sure. Because if you don't have the balance and you only have play, then you never get to skill build. And if you only have the skill building, you never get to play, then you never know how to use those skills. So there's somewhere in between that, and maybe it's different for all of us, but there's somewhere in between that's going to be most efficient for you. And it's not a mathematical formula. It's just what it is.
But if you wanted to try to figure out what's optimal, and I know we can't all be world-class players, and so what works for Federer and Filler might not work for me and you. Yeah, but not in terms of how much they've played, how much energy they invest, or what level they reach, but just in terms of the ratio. What percentage of the time do you think that the elite players spent on a table by themselves versus in competition with others? If you had to guess.
Oh, I think it depends on the player. If you're Shane and you really want to warm up for the world championship, you're playing on your home table 10 hours a day. He's notorious for that. But You know, I know some pros that barely touch a ball outside of competition. So I do think it is personal, but
Yeah, I think both of those are I think both of the extremes you mentioned are a little exaggerated. I don't think that there's
sure.
a okay, for example, I don't think that there's a pro that doesn't touch a ball on his own. Like there's not a player in the world that hasn't spent some time on their own, tinkering with shots, setting up shots, working on shots. It's just not possible. I mean, there's going to be a shot
Mhm.
that somebody did to them that they didn't know how to do, and they're going to want to set it up and work on it. So now it may be minimal, but the idea that they don't spend any time on their own, not possible. And then on the other hand, Shane, uh, okay, so I'm not suggesting that he hasn't had days where he spends 10 hours practicing on his own to warm up for an event. Okay. But if we zoom out on his career and say, how many days in a typical year does Shane spend 10 hours on his own? Very few. So
Yeah.
I think that that's, again, if we want to talk about a 1 day extreme, we could. But if we want to talk about averages and what his overall averages are, I don't think that that's a fair representation of his because if we look at a 10-hour practice day, that makes it look like 100% of the time he plays on his own. So if I would think if I had to guess, I would say that there's a range. But if I had to guess what percentage of the time Shane played on his own versus with others, I could see I could see Shane was pretty determined, and he went back when he was really, really hungry. He would, you know, work a lot on his own. But I would definitely bet that he had more hours in actual competition than he did on his own table.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but 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 whether it was 25% practice or 50% practice or 20% practice, I think he might have been pretty practice heavy. But when he was practicing, by the way, he was also mostly running balls, and he just said he doesn't really do drills, and sometimes he'll set up a shot and hit it a few times, but like and you'll see him like set up a shot and hit a shot a bunch of times just to warm up or kind of work on the feel of a shot. But he doesn't really, so most of his practice is running balls out. But he does practice the break or practice certain shots sometimes. So I would have to guess like 30%. I think he played a lot of
Yeah.
matches against people in long sessions. And then on the other hand, the people that train the least, who do you think is somebody that trains the least on their own?
Tony Chohan.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I think that it's easy to look at him now and say, yeah, he's kind of like, I don't feel like playing pool unless I'm getting paid for it. But
Yeah.
but when he was growing and learning, yeah,
Okay, so maybe that's a good distinction to have. Say, because you start the conversation by saying, what do you think the average ratio of practice versus play is for a pro? Oh, we're not pros. So so maybe in different stages of development, you could
right,
say it's
right.
worth more to practice more than 50% of what you play, you know? And maybe at a certain point it's more efficient to play more and practice a little less, etc. So
Yeah, I think that when you're growing, I think that when you're at the highest level, I mean, these guys just need to compete all the time, and that's probably what
yeah.
matters the most. I think when
Hmm.
you're growing, there's probably a larger role for independent play, particularly if you don't have competition available that will keep you busy all day. So in the end, I don't think that anybody grows to the world class level with more than 50% practice, versus
Yeah.
competition. That's all.
Yeah.
Just interesting though. It's interesting ideas. So yeah, it's interesting to think about how often they practiced when they were growing versus how much they competed and then what they practiced. Because again, while there's no right for everybody, if certain roads are heavily trodden to lead to the top, um, it might behoove you to follow that road. Yeah.
But don't prescribe yourself to that road.
Oh, experiment. Yeah. Use your own compass. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
You got to be like water. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know. All right. Cool, man. Well, I'm good. I'm good. Well, let's just call it there.
Thank
We can
you.
have another. I've got other stuff on my mind, but we can talk about it next time.
Yeah.
We'll keep these moving along, and we'll just do it again.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Nate. Hang on. How do I turn this off?